Welcome to the panel debate on gamification. My name is Mani, and it gives me great pleasure to moderate this esteemed panel of speakers for your benefit on a topic that has exploded in popularity in the last few years. Now, gamification, the art of taking the fun, exciting elements of games and pouring them into non-game contexts, is emerging in industries as varied as learning and development, life sciences, the corporate sector, of course, charity, you name it. There is an example that's popping up every day where gamification is being utilized. Now, it's a market that's projected to hit $5.5 billion by 2018. However, while some see gamification as the magic pill that makes customers, students, employees more engaged, there are others who view it as a form of exploitationware, a sort of corporate form of manipulation, if you will. So strong opinions exist on both sides of this aisle. I can tell you, the trash talking started 2 weeks ago. It felt a little bit like I was on, I don't know if you all have really bad viewing TV taste like I do, but WWF, I remember Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Well, that was these two in the lead up to this. So the motion we're debating today is called, the motion is gamification is an insult to humanity. And standing strongly behind this premise is this team here, led by Simon Terry. And arguing just as passionately on the other side is, we're going to call you guys the insultors or the insulted.
Call us right.
Well, okay, so here's okay.
Just call them an Uber car.
Okay, you can tell we're playing to win, right? So you will find placards on your seat, so red and green placards. When you hear something that you like, please raise it with the green card. When you are in violent disagreement with something that you don't like, the red card comes up. It is the end of the day. We don't have to be very sedate. I'm actually okay if you yell out with a boo or a cheer. Clap your hands, stamp your foot. Let's just get this as interactive as we can. It is the end of the day. I think drinks will be served halfway through. So, it's just going to get Once each side has made their opening statements, we will open the floor for you to engage. So if you have questions, if you have a position that you'd like the rest of the audience to hear, please raise your hand and Joe will come around with the mic. We also have Ella monitoring the Twitter feed, so if there's questions that come through there, we will bring those to light as well. So, kicking us off for the motion, gamification is an insult to humanity, Simon Terry.
So immediately my point is proved. Before I even had the chance to have the human respect of commencing my talk, my opponents have gamified this. So I need to go no further in really establishing the proposition that gamification is an insult to humanity. I'm going to start off today by introducing us to a few concepts around gamification and then moving into why gamification is an insult to our humanity because of its impact on the way we interact and its effectiveness. Kai will then move on to share with you why gamification misses some of the critical human points, and Tony's going to finish up by setting the wider context and really nailing the final point that gamification is a complete insult to our humanity. So what is gamification? In preparing for this debate, we actually had many discussions about what gamification is, and we actually thought we would just assign the entire debate to a debate about the meaning of gamification and whether it included or didn't include various things, or whether performance management was a form of gamification or competition was a form of gamification. Our opponents will naturally attempt to assert that all of human endeavour is some form of gamification, because that makes their task really easy because they can avoid the question. What we're going to say is that gamification is an attempt to involve the mechanics of games into human endeavour, and particularly in our view, the work context, to try and make the workplace a more engaging place. So we can engage in a lot of semantics, but we think that sets the parameters of what most people colloquially mean by gamification. And I think it's important that when you look at a lot of the literature, as I've been doing in preparing for this talk about gamification, there's this kind of confusion of the idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. You'll hear a lot of discussion of gamification and the role of those game mechanics as it's really about engaging intrinsic motivation. We're tricking the brain by getting into processes in the brain that will bring people and engage them into tasks. Let's be clear. Just because you're tricking process in the brain doesn't make it intrinsic motivation. It's still extrinsic. You're just connecting into processes that might generate a behaviour or a response to people. So what you'll see from our opponents is an attempt to mess and confuse that even further and discuss gamification as a natural part of human evolution. It's not that at all. It's in fact something quite alien and, as we go further, something quite ineffective in the way we manage relations. So you can't really have a debate without quoting that famous baseball philosopher Yogi Berra. And Yogi Berra was famous for saying 95% of the game is half mental. And that really applies to gamification. We are really in this situation where there's a muddled logic underlying the rationale for gamification. I did some research online, really strenuous research involving Google, and found the first academic paper I could find, which conveniently was a literature review of the gamification literature by Hamari, Koivutsu and Sasa of a university I won't name because I can't remember and I didn't pay that much attention. The important point they noted in reviewing over 46 papers on gamification, all studies of the effectiveness of gamification, was that their conclusion was that gamification had a highly qualified effectiveness. One of the reasons they were so qualified in their effectiveness of it was that they said it depended upon the motivations of the users. I thought that was the point of gamification. But if gamification depends upon having highly motivated users, and gamification is successful when motivated users are motivated in the games, I accept the proposition that our opponents are putting forward, but I don't. Because the point is that what also was called out by the survey was that it was, there was a novelty effect, that removal was often detrimental because people had got into the behaviours, and there was generally a sense of concern. So, how long did I have?
20 seconds.
20 seconds, my God.
2 minutes. 2 minutes, remember?
2 minutes, okay, great. So,
academics, come on.
If there is one, so if I can make one final point about gamification, gamification depends upon the idea that a game master can control the behaviours of others. If we've learnt anything in the last century, it's that relying on central planning and centrally devised rules and schemes of motivation is a very poor way to manage highly networked complex systems that are trying to respond to ever more complex and changing environments. So if you believe in a central game master who can control your fates and manage your motivations at a central level, then you will support the views of our opponents. But I think you're more mature than that and you understand the value of our argument.
Nice one. Trying to appeal to your sense of maturity on a Friday evening. I don't know if that'll work, Simon. And the mic moves over to Scott Ward. Gamification is an insult to humanity. Scott is going to argue against.
I don't know. Got me? Awesome. G'day, everyone. My name's Scott Ward. So we're here to say our basic perspective is we believe gamification is actually intrinsic to humanity. So I'm here to open the discussion. Christine is to add to the God's honest truth, and then Anne's going to take it home just to close. But essentially, gamification is just so innate to who we are. It's one of those things that we do. How many people here have ever been to the railway station, looked up and down the platform, and stood in the spot where they think the train doors are going to stop? Yeah. And how good does it feel if those doors line up there and you just step right in and bang, you are validated. doesn't. If it's down the road, you're like, oh, okay, next time I'll be there. But if you think back, think about being a kid, think about walking home from school and those lines in the footpath. How many of you tried to avoid the lines in the footpath? What a great way to turn a dull walk home from school into this amazing interactive adventure where somebody was going to die if you didn't get this next step right. And it goes further than that. How many people love getting that car spot in front of the restaurant that you're going to? We are wired this way. This is what gamification is about. There is something intrinsic to these experiences that are just endemic with being human. We think that they're isolated experiences, but actually these are commonalities that we share as a species, as a group. And that's what gamification is about. It's about understanding these little quirks of our personality and bringing them into the virtual space. So traditionally speaking, our virtual space has been this sort of sterile, non-interactive space. And we've looked at how can we build out the experience, be it doesn't matter if it's like in the work environment or wherever it is, we spend more and more of our time online. So how can we build in our natural wiring, or how can we have those environments reflect our natural wiring? Now it turns out that gamers have been studying this stuff for decades. They pioneered this. They've refined it down to a point where games are addictive. We heard this morning in the Minecraft talk about how addictive Minecraft can be. We're getting so good, we're getting so refined at building the structures and the behaviours to actually build something of inspiration, that why wouldn't we take them into our normal work world? Why wouldn't we take them into as much as we can to drive alignment, to drive engagement, to make people enjoy what they're doing? It's just a natural thing. So for us, gamification is actually intrinsic to humanity, first thing. There's a couple of things that these guys will try and argue around. See, they're going to argue that if you put this static structure in place that you're going to dehumanise people, and to an effect you're kind of right. But there's this thing called diminishing returns, right? Law of diminishing returns. And games become less sticky unless they evolve and develop in alignment with their communities. It's like the community management thing. It's never static. It's not a checkbox. You can't say we're done now. Gamification is a method of communication. It's a tool set or an artist palette that you can use to communicate or to emphasise different behaviours, different priorities, different importances, to take people from where they are today to where you want them to be in the digital space. There's nothing new here about gamification. Like nothing new. The only thing that has shifted is the context that we're applying these old contexts in. Does that make sense to people? Sometimes? Yay! Nice. So the other part of this is that quite often what we find is...
20 seconds, Scott.
Thank you. Is that there's freedom in structure. So when we open up these space and we start to provide a gamified platform for people to engage and to exchange, we give them a context through which they can build their discussions. And so what we see, and what I've seen in organisations, is by building gamified structures, we've actually been able to empower decision making down in lower parts of the organisation. These guys will try and argue against that, but I've actually lived it. Some of my clients are in the room, they've lived it, and we're right. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott. Back to the opposition team.
Don't start the clock. God, Scott. Okay.
Going for the sympathy.
Now, Scott, that was some beautiful words. You're giving us the very caring puppet master, you know, who creates those games for the poor people in the organisation whose behaviours have to be aligned with what the organisation needs. Because the people are not engaged and the people are not doing the work that they should be doing because the tasks are boring, because they're really not having enough fun at work, right? So by turning the work that is meaningless to people where they can't see the point of into a game, the opposition argues that we can actually care for the people and we're, you know, sort of putting, we're reaching our tool set of humanity and we're turning the whole workplace into a game, and so people will love it. What the opposition is doing, they are confusing having fun with enjoyment, right? You can enjoy work, but it's still serious. Turning it into a game trivializes work, right? What we need is to reconnect people with the purpose of the organization. Many people, they're being disengaged because they can't see the point of what they're doing. We've been through rounds and rounds of turning work into tasks, turning people into task bearers, and turning them into people who, need to show the behaviors that would benefit the organization, but they can't see the point. If they can't see the point, that's your problem. Gamification offers a nice, fun, shallow solution to a deep problem, right? And it is an insult to our humanity. It is an insult to our humanity because it is in our human nature to define ourselves in terms of what we do. If we can't see the point of what we do at work, that's the problem. Turning it into a game will only aggravate the problem, right? And so making it fun trivializes it, and turning it into a game is just an insult to our humanity. How much time do I have left? Yeah? Give it to them, they'll need it.
Thanks, Kai. Thank you very much to those who are holding up placards. It really helps our speakers know that they're on point or not. We have Christine Derry.
The generosity is extraordinary, really, isn't it, in this context? Okay, I've got to try and keep this thing on my ear, seeing that Kai bent it around. But, right, I'd like you all to stand up. Everyone up, on their feet. Because in gamified arrangements, we don't sit down. Everyone on their feet. Okay, very quick. We're going to play a very quick game here. All of those people, I want everyone to think of a number between 1 and 10. Quick. Now I want you to multiply it by 2. Everyone who's got an odd number, sit down. Okay. Those of you still standing, how many of you have a birthday between January and July? Put your hands up. Sit down. Ah, interesting. Okay. Out of those of you who are still standing, how many of you caught public transport here today? Stay standing, rest of you sit down. Okay. All right, out of those still standing, how many of you own a dog? Stay standing, rest, sit down. Okay, you win. You win. Well done. Congratulations. What have we just done?
What did they win?
What have we just done? We played a game, yeah? Is that gamification? No, exactly. Thank you. The smallest person in the room knows, and one of the smartest, I'd say, knows that this is not gamification. But what you have just been through is a typical process that we have seen when we've done a lot of research into this area, looking at social media and recruitment. You've just been through a recruitment process. That's as simple and as siloed as most recruitment processes typically look like. What we've looked at and what we're trying to understand is something about how gamification, when the mechanics of games are engaged with the workplace, what those things can do and how exciting life can actually start to look and how different it looks. And I'm going to take 2 things that we've talked about a lot today and talk to you about that in the context of gamification. And the first thing is the concept of community. Mia mentioned it today. She understands what community is about, how you start to co-create ideas, how you start to learn a lot more than just simple I'm in, I'm out. You start to understand how communities think and how I engage with that community. And how things become, yes, Kai, weirdly enough, fun. Because when things are fun, and when we are starting to enjoy what we're doing, we don't enjoy things because they've got simple bells and whistles. We're all too smart for that. Mia's friends don't enjoy playing that game because it's a game that's got a whole lot of sharp graphics and things around it. They enjoy it because there's something else that engages us beyond simple fun, but starts to get us to think differently. Because when we relax and when we start to engage in something that is more fun, we start to have new ideas and we start to think differently about ourselves and we start to think differently about the context that we're in. So when we start to apply some of these concepts into the organisation, when we think about it in recruitment, for example, what we see is people engaging with a process that either gets them to feel more excited and more engaged with what they're doing as they go through the game, or they in fact select out and realise that this isn't an organisation for them. They start to form communities around social networks. We have communities like Whirlpool around graduate recruitment processes, where graduates are talking together about the things that are useful and helpful to them going through these processes and starting to understand a lot more about each other. And they start to become more creative and energised through the whole environment.
20 seconds, Christine.
We also start to think about the creation of knowledge. So when we move beyond the recruitment processes and think about problems in organisations, and most of you, how many people have heard of Foldit? One of the greatest games ever invented, where we had a community of scientists who'd been working on a problem, a biological problem, for 2 years, 18 months, a significant period of time, invented a game, put it online, got gamers and worldwide communities involved, and within 3 weeks had much greater insights into the solutions to that problem that they'd ever had before. They didn't do it by closing everything off and working within their environment. They did it by inventing a game, engaging people, opening up their problem for more co-created learning, and guess what? You get more interesting and open solutions to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine. I don't know about you, but I'm always in favour of a game where there's a woman standing in front giving out instructions and everybody obeyed. Wow. For the motion again, we have Anthony Kitchener.
Let me see if it's working.
Yeah, it's working.
So in the tradition of, I was just listening to your speech, freedom through structure. So this has got certain overtones, freedom through structure. Lenin said electricity plus Taylorism equals communism. So what you're proposing is a form of Taylorism. Taylorism was about liberating the workers and making the workplace scientific. So always we have to have the latest. So in the early 19th century, the 20th century, science was going to fix everything. The problem is that gamification doesn't fix anything that matters. It doesn't. How are we going to game ISIS beheading? That's an important problem. How are we going to game climate change? That's an important problem. You know, the reality is this only applies to a tiny percentage of the workplace who are by and large exploited. A fair day's work for a fair day's pay. What you want to do is con them into thinking that they're having a nice time. So, it's not going to fix anything that matters. That's its first problem. Its second problem is it presumes an absolutely fair and reasonable power structure. And so one of the problems of the notion that the market is right is not only is the market not always right, but some of your bosses are not only ignorant and intolerant. Any green cards there? Some of them are crooks. And if they weren't crooks, any green cards there? If they weren't crooks, people wouldn't be going to jail for corporate fraud, and the largest corporations in the world wouldn't be paying massive fines for gaming the world financial system. $4 trillion, roughly, for the cost of the American bailout. Okay? So your bosses are often crooks, and you're going to put them in charge of making the rules. Which brings me to the final point. So we don't put them in charge of making the rules. We have this kind of hug-a-thon where we all agree that we're going to make the rules. The problem is that business is basically an activity for overweight, middle-aged white males. I include myself in this subgroup. So until gamification puts women, people of colour and people with disabilities in charge, it won't change anything. So it's just the status quo, and what you're essentially not going to get is a fair day's work for a fair day's pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Here's a woman of colour coming right up just to satisfy the diversity quota. We're now opening the floor for questions. So you've heard the... Oh, I'm so sorry, Anne. I'm so sorry. My apologies. Anne Bartlett from the Ripple Effect Group.
I'm just not sure what to say. Does this one? Oh, no, because it's been on boys' ears. Middle-aged white men. But seriously, actually, you know, I'm a little saddened, disappointed by the comments that came from my colleagues. Well, I thought they were. Simon, you're just very confused, and he wants to trick people, and he talked about aliens and muddled logic, and I kind of thought he was coming from there, because there is no game master. You know, like, guys, you need to get out more. Kai talked about games versus gamification. Well, I'm sorry, I think you're misunderstanding what a game is and what gamification is. And we said we weren't going to do debates around semantics, so I won't, but I'm sorry, you are confused. And Anthony, the scientific approach, I think Christine actually just answered that one for you about how we can deal with climate change and through the game of Fold It, and how Kaggle is using the collective intelligence of the audience by gamifying. And I want to make a sort of point here that using game mechanics is not playing games. We're not doing it to make people feel warm and fuzzy or happy. Gamification is using game mechanics to enable people to learn something in a different way. So again, I'm into sort of getting people out of their classrooms and doing things differently. So we talk about learning, and actually if you want some science, you could have a look at Being in the Flow, the positive psychology of that chap with the very long surname that's like Shkamitskyvali, and understand the mechanics of it. But it goes right back to war games and simulations. They were enabling people to challenge the status quo and test out theories without failing. So if we use gamified elements in the workplace and in our organisations, what we're allowing people to do is not lose. Games have losers. They have rules. They're actually doing everything that you guys are talking about. So if we use gamification, there should be no loser. Gamification is not badges, it's not leaderboards. It's enabling people to participate, creating an architecture of participation and engagement that enables people to test ideas, challenge the status quo, and do it in a safe environment. Getting feedback on achievement, immediate feedback, not waiting for 12 months for your performance review. You get it immediately and you know how you're doing, you know what you need to do. So we're not playing games here, we're not mucking with people's heads. This is getting all very dark, and I was quite deeply concerned as a psychologist of what was going on in these guys' minds about the deep deception and structure of organisations. Well, you know, that's not what it's about. It's about enabling people to perform at their best. And if we can do that using game mechanics, then I think that's a wonderful thing. If we can bring people together across the organisations to test out ideas and do that with collective intelligence, isn't that fantastic? Isn't that breaking down the hierarchy and enabling people to share ideas in a safe environment without challenging their jobs? I mean, I'm really stuck with there. I'm saddened. And then, you know, like we talk about all these other things, and then I just think we should add zombies in there. The zombie runs. You know, if you had a zombie in every organisation, I think we could achieve things. If you haven't done a zombie run and you struggle with Fitbit and all these other performance things, then look at the mechanics behind zombie run. it's far more popular than the fitness, well-being, and well-being is supposed to show that we care. And you have leaderboards, and we talked about this in our wearable section. The people that are highly competitive love the leaderboards and the fitness things and how many steps they've done. And by the way, I'll beat all of you, just if you want to get competitive.
But you won't lose.
Exactly. But that's playing a game, so that's not where it works. And this is where over 50% of the organisation will be alienated by the competitive high achievers. That's not what we're talking about. It's not about losers. So change the game and enable a zombie.
20 seconds.
Enable a zombie to participate in that, and you change the playing field. And we have no losers. We just have engaged collective intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So now you've heard from both sides of the aisle. You're welcome to engage in the debate. So I'm going to kick you off with a question, which will hopefully then have you go backwards and forwards between our panelists and yourselves. Now, I understand that quite a few companies in Australia have actually adopted gamification into your corporate lives. Is there anyone here who is willing to share, if you have, examples of what has worked for you, what hasn't worked for you? Anyone? Hold on a sec, Joe, we'll give you the mic.
All right, well, we've actually worked, I work in a professional services consultancy, and so for us, we've introduced gamification around improving our working capital days, which has had an extremely beneficial impact on our bottom line. And that's just been encouraging across all of our international offices through our Yammer platform, our communities around how people are improving and with who's, etc., etc. There you go. So it's been hugely successful for our company.
Thank you
and it
very
has
much.
had a really good impact to our bottom line.
Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else? So far, it's a plus for gamification. No? Okay. I'll ask questions and join in when you want to. Now, keeping in mind, we had the wonderful presentation earlier from Mark Sagar with the dopamine hits for the babies. I wanted to read you this quote. It's from a research psychologist, Gary Marcus, from the New York University. He says, "Our pleasure center consists not of some set of mechanisms perfectly tuned to promote the survival of the species, but a grab bag of crude mechanisms that are very easily outwitted. In other words, our brains can be hacked. Something that directors of romantic movies and marketeers have already taken advantage of for years and years. Is gamification just another mechanism to give marketeers more control over us?" And this question to the panel against gamification.
Against gamification, so the answer.
Well, again, so be you guys. Okay. Whoever, pick it up.
So I think you've brought up a really key point, which is to highlight the difficulty actually of game mechanics. So if we think about the movie industry as an example of plugging into people's motivations and drivers, and in fact, increasingly the video game industry works on the same economics of the movie industry. In the last few years, the cost of an average video release is over $40 million. Because it costs a lot of money to work out novel ways of inspiring human beings to activity. They release over 600 new games a year on multi-platforms in the United States, and most of them fail. So it's interesting that people are suggesting that average organisations could go out and create new game mechanics that will inspire their people to new behaviours.
Anyone want to counter?
I'll actually give these guys probably a little bit of ground in some ways. So in getting into this space and doing a whole heap of stuff in gamification, don't get too excited. You haven't heard what I'm going to say yet. It may not end happily. But one of the things that like the best gamification.
Scott, why don't you stand up and project?
One of the, Thanks. Brilliant. So one of the things that we're talking about Minecraft today, and there's a lot of evidence to show just how addictive these games are becoming. Yeah, I'll just hold it. So these games are becoming more and more addictive, to the point where there's been a few people who play games until they've passed away and all that kind of stuff. What we're seeing with technology now is it's so we're the line from where we go online to where we're offline is so blurred now with mobile phones, and these mechanics are becoming so ubiquitous across all devices, across all things, that quite often their influence is a bit subtle. And I think actually if you are going to get into the digital space and work in the digital space, educating yourself around why are you pushing the buttons you are, like what is it that's drawing you in to engage that application? Why did you click on Facebook? What compels you to keep posting or to go there? Like, what are the things that are at play within the technologies we use? Because that's essentially what gamification is about. It's about building persuasive technologies. And I think there is, at some point, there's an ethical question there. If kids are dropping dead because they're using a game, then there's questions we need to ask. But I think it points to the opportunity or the power of the technology. So that's why I think it's intrinsic to humanity. How you engage with it, I think, is you need to do it mindfully.
Hold on a sec, Kai.
Interesting comments from both sides of the panel, but the question I'd like to ask the for-motion side is, you said two things. One is gamification or games are addictive, as if that's a good thing. Normally when we talk about addictive, compulsive behaviors, we think of these people dropping dead at work because they're so involved in the game probably would not be considered to be a positive for the workplace because they're so involved with the games. But is gamification merely nothing more than Skinnerian operant conditioning? There's a reward system. There have been reward systems throughout history, and yes, reward systems are part of human behavior, and that we're just trying to manipulate the reward systems in the same way that food manufacturers find the bliss point so you can't stop eating. Is that what we're really trying to do?
No, of course we're not. No, I think addictive, you're looking at it from the, I suppose, definitions of... definition. Right, exactly. Okay, so when we look at and talk about being addictive, should I stand up because I'm small? When Maya talked about it this morning, she's talking about it from a level of engagement. And I look at what we used to do to people in e-learning in organisations. We make them sit in front of these computer screens and hit next buttons, and that means they've learned something, which, talk about Skinner, that was probably about as evil as you could get. But then you look at engagement and addiction with engagement. If somebody is hooked, as in can't stop playing the online version of what we're working with, or can't stop participating in a conversation, that's engagement. And I think that's where we're probably talking about addiction is more around engagement. I don't want to stop, but not the addiction, I need some more alcohol. It's just over there, by the way. That sort of addiction. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a good thing either.
We'll go to Kai and then we'll go to you.
I think we'll just hang on to it, if that's all right.
As you wish.
I like playing games, and I totally get what Maya was talking about, using games to educate people. All of that is fine, you know, and we all get that we want to include people and we want to build communities, None of that, however, has to do with gamification. Gamification, something is being turned into a game or being endowed with game mechanics where there weren't any before. So the opposition here, on some level, they resort to calling anything gamification that we used to do before, like playing games or, enjoying the company of others, or, having promotions that people can aspire to and things like that. Now, we can do that, but then gamification means everything, so it means nothing. So we can just stop talking about it. Or we talk about using game mechanics to turn things into games that weren't games, like work. And then that's something that I would oppose to, because why would you want to do that? If someone enjoys their work, they work their ass off, for the company. If they can see a point, right? People who work for Apple, they spend hours and hours at Apple, not because they gamify what they are doing, or they hand out badges. Oh, they weren't talking about badges. Or they have leaderboards. Oh, no, you weren't talking about that either. If I look at the literature on gamification, it's all there. Anyway. Where was I? Apple. People go and work for Apple because they believe in something, that they're part of something, they're part of a community, part of an idea, and they really can see the point of being part of something great. That has nothing to do with gamification. They're engaged, they enjoy their work, presumably, and they have flow experiences as well. I enjoy my work, I don't want to be gamified. And, if someone wants to try that, I really sort of get suspicious and cynic about it.
Great.
I don't know. That's what I'm talking about. So what are you talking about?
Audience question?
Oh. Hi, my question is for the anti side. And I do agree to some point that it taps into the human's shallowness. But then so what? If it produces results and it helps the community, is it such a big deal? I mean, you say it's an insult to humanity, but there are greater insults. I love to win, so, if I enjoy it.
You want to take that? No, we want that on mic. We want that on film.
What's the difference between that and slavery? Gets results, build the and so you say it gets paid for it. But there are people who are on roller skates zipping up and down the aisles at Amazon to select your doodad, and they get paid $6 an hour or $7 an hour. They put them in old mining towns where there's no work. They've got GPSs so they can be seen that they're not slacking off. And then you're going to put onto these people who are the lowest paid, who have got no opportunities, you're going to put some other structure on them to make them more motivated. It's just like, I find it really offensive.
If I can add to that while we've got the other side on the robes, I think it's really important to recognise that there's actually one further consequence of gamification. The psychological research around gamification actually has a concept called over-justification in it, which is that people who begin with a purpose in their work can actually lose it into the game. And so actually the game becomes the logic of why they're doing the task. So you actually started off with people who were purposeful and engaged in their work and seeking to achieve further outcomes. And by the end of it, they're cynics trying to cheat a game for an outcome. And I think that is where you start to see that dynamic we're talking about, where we've perhaps moved away from the humanity of seeking to give people purposeful chances to impact the world.
It's interesting, isn't it? Here we are talking about disruption, new ways of doing things, new types of organisations, new ways of seeing things, new ways of trying to make our organisation more innovative, challenging our ideas. I thought that's what we've been talking about all day, actually. New understandings. How do we approach things like recruitment to ensure that the talent that we have is the talent that we need in these environments? How do we get more people to participate in the decision making around the organisation? How do we get people to see and look at things differently? There are a whole lot of tools around gamification that we've seen in action, and these are not games that are just designed inputted into the organisation and left there. These are co-created environments, just as Mia showed us this morning. This is where people start to grab hold of the game, to think about things differently, to input that back into the way of thinking again, into the gamified process or the process that's got game mechanics into it, and create more innovative, exciting organisations that, guess what, are more effective and more productive. That's why companies like L'Oreal have continued with their recruitment process. That's why they've been able to inject a whole lot of new ways of thinking into recruitment. We're seeing a recruitment process out there that's yielding exactly the same outcomes as it did 50, 60, 80 years ago. With poor quality recruitment, high costs, high turnovers, not able to engage talent in the way we want to engage it, and we're seeing a lot of the mechanics of games being applied in really effective ways to improve that process and to engage companies in new ways. I thought that's what we were on about, new ways of thinking, disruption.
Okay, we can't.
You know, we're actually traversing a lot of different roles. You know, we've had the example of the Amazon shop floor employee, and we've had the scientists who are building Folded. Do we feel that there's a particular industry or a job description which would actually benefit by gamification? Joe? Audience? Okay, go for it.
I've just got a question around, do you think there's gamification for good and gamification for evil? Is there a middle ground that you both agree on, where it's explicable and where it's not?
We've agreed not to agree today. I don't know. Maybe.
No.
But, okay. We say no.
That's right. Work is work. Games
That's
are
right.
games. You're getting it mixed up. You're getting it mixed up. And every time you get these things mixed up, is football a game or is it a sport? So, well, when it becomes work, then suddenly, when it ceases to be a game, it gets corrupted. So why are we taking drugs to improve our performance? Because there's a huge reward in money. Well, that would be a very positive reinforcement. It makes it worse. It doesn't make it better. And so the problem is it's a slippery slope. And so, we talk about disruption, and you say, well, how come we, fat old white men are saying don't change things? Well, we've been here before. Exploitation is exploitation is exploitation, right? This is what this is. What are the structures? When a gamified set of rules works where the head, I noticed on the walk that ANZ Bank is here, the head of the ANZ Bank earns $9 million a year. Executive salaries are more twisted than they ever were. The poor dudes at Amazon aren't getting any more. The whole point of it is to tilt the playing surface, not to level it.
No.
Hold on. I'm going to take some. I'm going to take some feedback from the audience.
I need to respond very briefly to Christine, and since I have the microphone,
Hold your
I will just
hold your horses, Mr. Reamer. I'm going to take an audience question. We have Hank.
Hi, I'm Hank, and I actually would like to talk about gamification in society as opposed to in the workplace. I've been working on a concept to gamify driving or better driving. So you get points for turning on your indicator. You get lots of points for stopping for pedestrians as you should. You lose points obviously for doing bad things. And obviously I'm looking at developing countries where there's very, very poor law enforcement to do this gamification. Now, but I kind of got to say the pro-gamification camp has been very emotive, and what I'm really interested in is the actual results. What is actually happening out there with gamification examples? What are the actual results we're seeing as opposed to the underlying psychology which has been debated today?
There's some pretty amazing results. There's been some really interesting results coming out, and again, what we're talking about is carefully designed use of gamification, not for exploitation, not for evil, but to actually change behaviours, reinforce it, reward it, and sort of get the feedback, the immediate feedback happening. McDonald's rolled out Nintendo DS systems across all 3,800 stores, and they were training people how to use the systems and a number of different things. What they were doing in classrooms was taking a long time, and people weren't that good when they hit the workplace. When they put it into the Nintendo DS, they were training people in half the time. They were immediately functional when they got onto the shop floor, so they didn't have this buddy systems and the cost of doing it. And yes, it cost to develop the Nintendo, but when they amortized it out across all the stores, it was about $500 per store cost. And that is substantially less than what it was costing for the classroom training that was taking double the time, and then with employees who weren't very functional on the floor. So that's just one, but there's a number of others that are reporting the same thing. The speed of the training that had been done in traditional ways has been substantially reduced, and the engagement levels are higher, and the transfer of learning into the workplace is higher. So I think the results are actually there. There's more. I could find them.
Thanks, Anne. We've got another audience question.
I was just wondering, as far as like exploiting workers, do you object to the exploitation of workers, or do you object to those workers maybe enjoying it a little bit more?
I think it's just, you know, it's the wrong questions to ask. Right? And I'm not saying it's not a good question, because it points to the right problem. But I think we need to ask a different question. Can we not find different ways of engaging people than trivializing what they are doing? And I agree with you. We're here to talk about disruption and doing new things, but not everything new is actually effective or would work. You know, someone needs to design the game, right? They design a game, they get the right outcomes, fine. What happens if the world changes? They have to redesign the game. So someone has to actually, someone actually has to be in charge of changing the rules. It's the opposite of what Adam Pisoni talked about last year when he talked about responsiveness, of including people in engaging them and actually self-organize the way they work. You don't need game mechanics for that. You don't need game mechanics for that. And if you believe in the wisdom of the crowd, and you know, the more people being more, you know, smarter in figuring things out than, you know, the one person who gamifies the system, they'll always outsmart the gamifier. And you know, what did you say? You had a good quote about, you know, sales systems.
Oh, if you want to discover the flaw in a sales incentive system, give it to a sales force.
Well, there you go. So I think, you know, gamification is just the wrong tool for the job.
But I can fix the happy worker problem. Let them smoke dope at work. You want happy, content workers? Let them smoke dope.
Okay, it does sound like a 5 p.m. discussion. I'm very happy there's no HR in the room. Another audience question.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried about Kai, to be honest.
Quite a few of us.
So my daughter's just been through a 10-year gamification system that resulted in a high score and then a game over position, which was called school, and the HSC score. So my question is, Kai, are you being held hostage on that side, or are you 3 turkeys voting for Christmas?
No, that's thanks for bringing it up. First of all, if we stick the gamification label on anything that has level ups or, you know, an end state or anything, school is not a game. Yeah, and we would all agree with that. We can use games in education. I've developed some myself. That's a great idea, and it gets people to learn something. The school system is a great point because it is being gamified. My school, NAPLAN. The academic system is the same, journal ranking lists. What it does, it gets academics to write more publications. Does it get them to do more innovative, risky research? No. So it gets the results because, you know, gamifying a system in that way gets you the results that you gamify for, but you might lose track of the original purpose, which is giving your child a great education, not getting the school to do well in some ranking, right? So that's my point. And so I'm sitting here for a reason.
And we're staying quiet because they're doing our work. That's all I wanted to say.
Ella, do we have any questions from Twitter?
No, I think everyone's been listening quite intently. Nothing particular is coming up from Twitter, so if you do have questions, feed things in. But lots of commentary.
Audience, any other questions? We'd love to have you engage in verbal combat with the team of panelists sitting up here. Oh, here we go.
Isn't a formal debate the gamification of argument, and if so, why are you participating? Oh, I know, you guys are fine.
No, debate is a debate. Yeah. So what do I need? What do I need? We have debates by far precede the label gamification. So what do we need to get the label for? You know, we had debates before. We do debates now. Debates are useful.
We had education.
Yeah, we had education before.
We had work before.
We had work before. We competed before. Yeah. So.
Oh, Maya would like to speak. Brilliant. I'm going to have a sensible input.
What am I saying? Okay. So gamification is about reaching goals, and I feel like this debate is really limited to getting a reward. But if goals becomes more than a reward, it can be about expanding. It can be getting a new employee and stuff like, and getting, benefiting yourself, which in itself is a reward, which makes gamification really positive. Isn't that what we're all trying to achieve here? When you enter into a business, when you go into work, you're trying to do something, and if it's via game or gamification, reaching your goal, what's so bad about it? And if success of gamification, and it's about involving users. It's about engagement, influence, and loyalty. Making them come to your workplace, making them go into your Twitter account, influencing them on what they do daily if they want to buy that product or the next one. And if gamification has no losers, does this mean this debate also has no losers?
Neither you member.
Do you want to respond to that, Simon, Kai, Anthony? I was really directed at you guys.
So I don't think we're making any argument that it's not about achievement, and we're not making any argument that it's not about human purpose and fulfillment. And in fact, I would take the point that was raised before about us being against disruption to a slightly different level. The essence of our argument is that we're in favour of humanity. And if you look at the opportunity with digital disruption, it's actually an opportunity. Thanks, Mark. And what we're arguing is that there are better opportunities for humanity, which is by using other techniques.
What you're arguing before.
Essentially what Maya's trying to say is that everything that they're saying is supporting our argument, and they aren't digging themselves in, and they may as well just pat the sand on their head.
Kai.
Just a comment, Kai, you were saying that gamification might be good for learning but not for work. Where are the examples where you work where you haven't learned anything?
That's not an argument against my point. See, I will answer Maya's question while I let yours simmer in the back. See, I think we're not too far away, and at the danger of starting to agree again, which is always dangerous in a debate. But we're making a subtle point, because gamification can turn into manipulation, and then that's where it is a problem. If you're in charge, if you are gamifying, if you have, if you're setting yourself goals and you're trying to reach your goals by, going into game-like behavior, all of that is fine, right? But if someone puts you in a structure where they make the rules of the game and they want a behavior out of you that benefits them but not you, then that is an insult to our humanity, and that's what we're arguing against. I'm not saying that game mechanics are not useful for reaching goals, and that they not help us learn, and that they're not good for education and learning in certain ways. And so I'm with you on that. And yes, you know, learning can happen in the workplace. You can use those mechanics for learning in the workplace. The point is that if you gamify work itself, right, and it's usually someone gamifying it, it's not happening just because, you know, it's not happening spontaneously like a combustion. Someone is actually gamifying it. And gamification then becomes manipulation, and that's an insult to our humanity.
So some games are good and other games are not good? Christine.
You know, we saw probably an outstanding presentation today, and may I thank you very much for being with us and understanding the nature of gamification so much better than our colleagues over here who seem to have, I don't know, living under a rock somewhere. But here is the concept of game mechanics being used for no purpose, with no purpose out there, but with a purpose of being able to explore, innovate, think differently, explain principles that are difficult to understand, engage in a process of actual learning. Not about content, not about a game master, not about anyone being manipulated, but about the process of enhancing your own capabilities to be innovative and be rewarded for that innovation through your own expression.
The purpose to sell is to sell the game, though. That's the purpose of the game.
Which game?
Minecraft. So yes, altruistic in the altruistic in the form.
Yeah.
Altruistic in the form that it's without a purpose and people can make the game out of what it is, but the purpose of Minecraft is to sell Minecraft to 13-year-old girls or their parents at $8 a pop or whatever it was, times however million users. So, you know, that's a subtle difference in that there is still a profit margin in trying to have that game, and yes, it works by game mechanics and getting people hooked or addicted, is to sell and shift game units.
But isn't that confusing the tool with the outcome? I mean, there is a tool here that has got that, you know, that clearly provides an avenue or a vehicle in which to engage in these activities. That's not, the game is created on board the tool. That is, you know, that's the whole basis that when we talk about technology now. It's not a technologically deterministic argument. The platform's not determining the outcome. The outcome's being determined by the practices through the engagement with the technology itself. It's got to be a good thing, yeah?
The whole point of gamification is to confuse the tool with the outcome. The whole point, Peter Drucker famously said, there is absolutely no point doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. And we are in that space. We are trying to optimize mechanics for their own sake, rather than seeking to achieve a human purpose, which we all know is deeply engaging.
And what you said earlier about what, you know, Minecraft and Maya are doing, you know, no one is disagreeing with that, but we wouldn't call it gamification, you know. Not gamification as in someone is gamifying something. That's not what that's not what, no, it's not.
My history teacher took Minecraft and gamified for a history lesson by showing it, right?
Yeah, I just think that we're getting, yes, it's already on a game platform, but we're taking it to a different level. So we're turning education into a more fun and involving environment. So yes, it's already on a game platform, but still we're not gamifying the game, we're like gamifying the education, which is quite positive because again it makes the student more interested, which not benefits the teacher, it benefits the student and later in life because, you know, they've had that experience and they remember it. And yeah.
My mother is 92. And when she was your age, she told me the story that in the shoe shops here in Sydney, you would go in and to stop the pernicious and widespread problem of shoes that didn't fit, The shop assistant would x-ray your foot with a machine with a great lump of radium in it, and they'd blast your foot and they'd take an x-ray. And what happened was that a huge number of people got radiation burns, not because x-rays are good or bad, it's because they're just completely misused for the wrong purpose. Because it was a trivial problem, shoes that don't fit, like most of the problems that gamification is solving. Trivial.
Hang on. So, one of the exciting things for me about gamification is where else could we use it? Like we're just touching the surface with it now. So Christine told the story about Foldit, and that was a story about they needed to map this protein, and this it was a highly complex protein. Yeah, and it's seen as a critical stepping stone to figuring out AIDS. And scientists had worked on it for a decade, couldn't work it out. They stuck it on a gaming platform, and they worked it out in, I think it was 10 days or something like that. Incredible, absolutely incredible. I was fortunate enough to have coffee with the guy that built the platform over in San Francisco, and chatting to him was really fascinating. He said some of the ways they did it was they had to have the scientists, the game designers and the players all actively facilitate at the same time to build out the game. Because my question to him was, how do you build a game where you don't know the outcome? And he said we just had to actively facilitate between those three groups. And the other thing that he said that was really fascinating was that 75% of their top players actually had almost no biology experience at all. So it shows that there's a real power here to actually build in capabilities and skills on the fly, and to take people that don't necessarily have any skills in a particular area and train them up into a new space. And I think in terms of gamification and where we're at with it today, we've touched a bit on education, we've touched a bit on recruitment and different parts of industry and marketing, etc., but we're really still early days in this whole space. And I actually think learning this skill set is going to be an incredibly important capability for leaders and managers and creators of the new century.
Thanks, Scott. That's a wonderful example. I'm going to take one last question from the audience, and then we're going to vote on this, I think.
Okay, I'll be short as I'd like to get a drink too. Yeah, I have the following concern about gamification. I can see lots of benefits, but in the workplace, my concern would be that it's a relatively easy way to reach better outcomes, to get people to be more productive. And my concern would be that it takes managers' eyes off of other important solutions to workplace problems that they should be thinking about. Like, how do you make this kind of work intrinsically motivating? And in many cases, there are things that the workplace should be doing, particularly for people who don't make a lot of money, hourly wage type people. There are a lot of things that should be done to make the workplace better for them. And my concern would be, and if you could adjust this, it'd be great, that gamification allows them to sort of improve, well, to get better outcomes without actually improving the workplace environment. Thanks.
I've never heard of a manager sitting back wondering how they can make it more intrinsically rewarding for their staff. But I have heard of managers sit back and wonder how they're going to hit their KPIs and how they can enable their team to hit their KPIs. What gamification does is it asks people, it challenges you to figure out what are the intrinsic motivators I could use in order to facilitate these KPIs. So gamification for the sake of it, I don't necessarily think it's a good thing, but I think gamification, if you're looking to deliver on strategy, if you're trying to deliver some sort of business outcome, then there's value to it. And you can't use gamification successfully without tapping into somebody's intrinsic motivators. Just, it doesn't work. You can't put up badges and expect people to care unless that stands for something, like that it points to something else, something deeper, meaningful. Yeah. So I think it would be a rare manager, I think, that lies awake at night wondering how to make the tasks more motivating or more, intrinsically interesting.
Why don't we gamify the managers then?
Well, we do. It's called KPIs.
No, hold on. Is there any final comments? Final comments from the audience, because we're just going to have to vote on this. It's 5 minutes to drinks. You've heard a range of different perspectives from either side. If you are convinced that gamification is an insult to humanity, please hold up your green cards.
Oh, you can just find their cards. There you go. Yeah, I keep getting used mine. Okay.
And if you passionately believe that gamification is of benefit to humanity, please raise your red cards.
Red.
Ooh.
Oh, that's so close. It's not close. It's not close then.
It's close to I thought you'd get.
I think the votes are for.
Can we get you to hold up your green cards and your red cards at the same time?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, Alan just wants a picture, but congratulations to the team that, sorry guys, okay, hold up your cards.
Red, put up red if you voted green, hold up green, and then if you
Brilliant, congratulations to this team. Gamification is not an insult to humanity, but thank you for all our panelists, and thank you very much for engaging with us today.